Shares of Teck Resources are indeed trading higher after a first quarter earnings beat. The company reported higher than expected profit in the quarter, offset by lower than expected production. And First Quantum Minerals is also in the news. It's reported results, but perhaps more importantly, I think almost certainly more importantly, there's news from Panama as well. Let's talk about both these stories with Dalton Baretto, Managing Director of Equity Research at Canaccord Genuity. He covers metals and mining. Dalton, thanks a lot for joining us. Let's start with Teck Resources. The stock is well off its highs. Copper prices are pushing higher, however. And today, the company's reported a set of results that really reflects its earnings power when copper prices move up and the company is able to produce more copper. In other words, the company has topped earnings expectations. What do you think of these results?
The financial results were really great. And, it's interesting to note that these results were actually driven by their zinc business, believe it or not. Their copper business has yet to fully show what it can do. They recently built a $9 billion mine called QB2 in the mountains in Chile, and they're still in the process of ramping that up. So these results you see today are not really fully reflective of what this company can produce when that mine is up and running.
The company is still producing copper. QB2 is, as the name implies, the second phase of the very large initial QB1. That's Quebrada Blanca, I believe. How much copper is the company able to produce now?
When the thing's fully up and running, this company will produce north of 500,000 tons of copper a year, which will make it, one of the top 10 to 12 producers in the world. And importantly, this mine is a pretty low-cost mine as well. So the consolidated cost for Teck to produce copper will come down to, below $2 a pound.
And talk to us about the zinc business. It gets less attention, but it is certainly a big part of Teck and proportionally bigger now that the company, for some time now, has not been a producer of metallurgical coal.
That's correct. And, their Red Dog mine up in Alaska is arguably one of the best zinc mines in the world from a grade perspective as well as from a cash flow perspective. And Teck is, it's a vertically integrated zinc business because they also have the Trail smelter in BC where they process a lot of this concentrate, and they produce a lot of rare earth metals there as well from the concentrate, things like indium and germanium, which are, critical metals in today's world.
I'm looking at the company's corporate presentation from today. It says it's closely monitoring the potential impact of tariffs, but it does say copper concentrates it sells to customers out of the United States. There has been speculation, of course, about how tariffs would affect the metals industry. So the comment it makes on this slide is it sees no material impact on sales from tariffs. Do you see it that way as well?
On the copper business, absolutely. With the zinc business, about 20% of its zinc goes to China. And so that would be exposed to Chinese reciprocal tariffs. But these metal markets are global markets, and there's lots of opportunity to pivot that material away into spot markets or even to some of their other customers in other parts of Asia.
Okay, let's talk about the share price. The shares are, as we noted, we can bring back a one-year look at the stock well off their highs. Is that a surprise to you, given the strength of metals markets that we've seen, copper in particular?
Well, I think the space in general has pulled back a fair bit since the start of this year, but particularly since Liberation Day on April 2nd. The concerns around the impact on global trade from tariffs are sort of, keeping people on the sidelines. But the copper price continues to march forward, particularly the U.S. Copper price. There is a premium for metal that's in the country right now. And broadly speaking, my view is that a lot of these copper producers, in fact, all of them, I think, are relatively undervalued. I've got to buy across the board.
I'm just looking on my screen at a one-year price history of the price of zinc. I don't think we can put that up on our screen, but it looks remarkably like the shape of the graph of Teck Resources, the shares. In particular, there's been a big sell-off in the price of zinc that began in late March and has run through essentially to the present day. And you see that in the Teck Resources graph as well. Is zinc material to the way investors perceive this stock?
Not necessarily. I think that's a correlation without necessarily a causation there. I think a lot of the miners' charts will look reasonably similar.
Okay, let's move on to First Quantum Minerals. The company has released earnings, but ever since that day a couple of years ago when the government of Panama abruptly shut down Cobre Panama in Panama, the earnings really haven't been all that important. But there are developments in Panama that sound encouraging. Why don't you take us through those?
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a definite thawing in relations between the government of Panama under relatively new President Molino, who took his seat back in July, and the company. President Molino's primary focus when he took his seat was to deal with a very pressing social security issue, but he has said numerous times that dealing with the situation around the mine would be next. And here we are today. The social security issue is effectively behind the government now, and they're turning attention to the mine. And one of the key prerequisites to having these conversations was that First Quantum drop its 2 arbitration processes that were put in place. And so First Quantum has complied. They have suspended or discontinued both processes. And now the ball's in the Panama government's court to come back and to sit down at the table and have some conversations. But the fact that President Molino is out there, in public forums Tuesday night or even just this afternoon, talking about this mine and what the path forward could look like and what the country is missing by suspending this mine bodes very well for the path forward.
I'm looking at a summary of your notes. Your take is that the direction that this story seems to be moving in is positive, but there are difficult negotiations ahead, and investors shouldn't expect the mine to reopen until the second half of 2026, correct?
I think that's fair.
Okay. And what about the earnings? What are the earnings telling us? The company does have some other copper mines elsewhere in the world. How important are they to the First Quantum story?
They are crucial today because they are the only operating mines that the company has, and it needs them to service the debt that was taken on to build Cobre Panama, right? And so the underlying operating performance of First Quantum is incredibly important because it does have that debt. And so when I look at the Q1 performance, I would call it better than expected. They produce over 100,000 tons of copper, about 40,000 ounces of gold. Commodity prices, as you said, are creeping up, particularly gold prices. That cash flow is incredibly important at this point in time.
Dalton, thank you so much for joining us. Dalton Baretto is Managing Director of Equity Research, specializing, of course, in metals and mining at Canaccord Genuity. He, by the way, has a buy rating on shares of Teck Resources with a price target of 71 Canadian dollars. That's well ahead of the current share price of about 45 or so. And he has a hold rating on shares of First Quantum Minerals with a price target of 20 Canadian dollars, which is about where that stock is right now. When we